I'll take their bet that we can't make it through. And when you come to me and tell me all the things you've seen, I wonder what we could have been that's true. But I believe things are better than they seem. And when I find your name, I see their bet and I think I'll raise it too. Nothing else to do. And when I think of all those places I'd have rather been, the drowning in a sea named after you. Oh, now I believe that we can find relief. And when I find your beaming, I see their bet and I think I'll raise it too.
Hello and welcome back to the HVXgoat podcast, the Goat Cave. Today we've got a very, very special guest, 1 week after Father's Day actually, but we got my dad, Wayne Galbraith, here to talk a little bit about tattooing and his over 20 years of professional tattoo experience. So it's going to be a really good one. For some BMX updates, we got Biz Jordan's Headlights part is now out. That video part was absolutely insane overall. He is just such a great rider in general too, so shout out to that guy. He had a roof drop onto a moving truck, and then he drops in on the front of it, which was super cool. Wooden kinked rail manual, that was awesome. There's a huge curve rail at the end, or the ender, and it's ridiculous. It's curved both directions. You can check out his video part on ourbmx.com. The Andrew mixtape 2.5 is on ourbmx.com as well, and the Fathead and Emerson video on Dig. Check those all out. For music, we've got Bad Religion at the Phoenix, July 25th. I'm still probably going to get tickets. I really want to go to that, but hopefully they don't sell out. Definitely try and get some tickets if you guys haven't already. Bad Religion doesn't really come to Canada too often, I don't believe, and they're an absolutely amazing band. Theoretically Nameless Band plays Strummerfest August 3rd in Uptown Waterloo, and Illicit is going to be playing a Battle of the Bands gig at Harmony Lunch on July 12th. And Southbound will be there with them too, so check them all out. We're going to play one more song, which is Goron City by No Such Noise, and then we're going to start off this interview.
Start the week with another night of channel surfing till 3 in the morning, and I'm tired. But when I close my eyes, the room goes spinning around again. Do we pretend to care the moment we went from first to worst? Instead of killing time with lines in the verse, we can live this way. It isn't what you wanted to hear. Until it's time in the back of my head. No surprise, it's exactly the thing I grew up to fear since I was a kid, and it brings me back to a place I know. If only I could bring you back with these things I know. What I know now, it feels like yesterday. Before I had to think of tomorrow, it seems that just yesterday I was showing my little brother the best way to Goron City. I can understand the way it's meant to be. I can understand the way it's meant to be. I can understand the way it's meant to be. Now do you feel it pushing and pulling? It's bringing you to your knees. It's not for me. It's not for me. It's not for me. Yeah. So let me be.
Alrighty, and we're back. That was No Such Noise with Goron City off of Bad Time Records' release of The Shape of Ska Punk to Come. We've got my dad here, Wayne Galbraith, who's a professional tattoo artist. You've been tattooing for how long?
This will be 25 years,
Wow,
or coming up on 25.
that's fucking crazy, man. Literally longer than I've been alive, which is insane.
Yeah, I got tattoos that are older than you.
Wow.
By all, obviously. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems weird when I say it out loud, but then I think about it. I'm like, of course I have tattoos that are older than you. But like,
Yeah, exactly.
it seems weird when you actually say it out loud. But
Yeah. How did you get into tattooing then?
okay, this is a bit of a long story, but I got into it in high school. I started building my tattoo machines and tattooing all my friends and doing horrible tattoos on everybody. Some of them weren't even that bad. I shouldn't say horrible, but like, doing it the wrong way, scratching out of my apartment and tattooing all my friends. And I think I realized pretty quickly, like after the first year or so, that if I didn't get an apprenticeship and learn how to do it right, then I wouldn't be able to go anywhere with it. So I kind of started looking around for an apprenticeship, and everything kind of happened like it's a mixture of like good fortune and good decisions. You know what I mean? So like a little bit of it was just kind of right place, right time, but also taking advantage of those situations. So at the time, Al had opened a shop up in Owen Sound. It was Tattoos by Zap. We already knew who he was because he already had a good reputation, but he just opened his first storefront studio, and it was probably open for about 6 months. So I went down there to talk to him about an apprenticeship. I get in there, he's away on his honeymoon. His old apprentice, Dave Nicholson's there. Dave's in from Vancouver, and he is an amazing tattoo artist. I didn't know that at the time. I come in, and I'm like, I want to learn to tattoo. I have, I'm doing it at my house, and I'm awesome. And at the time, I had, like, these crappy tattoos that I had tattooed on myself. And he was kind of, like, not making fun of them, but he was definitely, like, he gave me the riot act of it tattooing out of my house. And how, like, dangerous it is, and how, like, you're just a scratcher. And, I'm like, well, that's why I'm here, because I want to learn how to do it right. And he was like, I kind of left there with like a bad taste in my mouth. I thought, you know what, this guy doesn't know anything. And I buy a tattoo magazine on the way home, and sure enough, I open it up, and there's a whole article on this guy that I just spoke to. So I was like, well, if he must be doing something right, like if I want to be in these magazines, then I need to go back and talk to this guy when he's back from his honeymoon. And I came back. I showed up like 2 weeks later. I brought my portfolio. And I met with Al Zimmerman, owner of Tattoos by Zap. He gave me a bucket and a sponge. And he said the first thing you need to learn about tattooing is how to keep it clean. So he started teaching me how to clean the shop from top to bottom, how to solder needles, how to mix ink. And I think within the first week, I was color and flash, soldering needles, mixing ink, drawing tattoos. And the big thing about that was like, that's before the internet. That's like probably 95, 94. So long time before the internet, and we didn't even have a photocopier at the shop. So basically, if you drew something, you had to draw it the exact right size, or you had to redraw it bigger or smaller. So that was kind of my foray, was like, because he didn't care about people waiting. So he would just he'd just be like, draw it again, draw it bigger. And I'd draw it again and draw it bigger. And he's like, no, bigger, bigger, bigger. And that's kind of got me, I think it really taught me quickly how to draw it like fast and draw it right, So that was kind of, I think within the first 6 months, he was on the phone with his old apprentice from Vancouver. And he was like, I have a guy here now, blow your mind. He's the best apprentice I've ever had, not to brag. But because I showed up on time and I actually tried my best. But I was also kind of like this, skinny little kid with a skateboard amongst all these like bikers, right? And they were like every day, talking about how they wanted to beat me up, and they weren't very welcoming at the time for newcomers. But I think that was kind of the test, right? Because they wanted to put you through the paces, and if you kept coming back every day, then chances are you really were maybe kind of like you were determined to do it. So within I think about a year, Dave showed up again, and he was blown away that it was me. He's like, I thought you would never come back after I talked to you. And that's so it's pretty cool, because he's tattooed me since then, and he's an insane tattoo artist. He's so good, and I learned so much just from like, I studied all his drawings. So like, there was flash and all the paintings and all the pictures that he had done. So I studied intensely like how he drew his line drawings and stuff like that, and just kind of really nerded out on that and tried to get it, try to make my stuff look as good as that. And it's kind of funny because he was trying to make his stuff look as good as Philip Liu from Switzerland, who at the time everybody was trying to emulate. So that was kind of it's kind of neat how it all works in like this kind of like slow evolution where you can kind of trace it all back. But So that's how I got started into it anyhow.
That's awesome. That's
the short version.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. I've heard that story quite a few times, but I think that like just sitting down listening to it kind of changes a lot about it, which is nice. Like you really get to understand it all. But yeah, that's awesome. At what point did you decide you wanted to be a tattoo artist then?
You know, it's kind of funny because in high school, I didn't even want to get a tattoo, like for the most part, because the tattoos were kind of like, it wasn't appealing to me. It was all like heavy metal dudes had tattoos, like guys that listened to Guns N' Roses, and that just wasn't my scene. Like we were in the exact opposite kind of thing. You know, coming from more of a punk scene, it just seemed kind of like that wasn't my scene. I was like, what would I get? Like a rose and a gun or something? Like it just seems stupid. And then this is gonna sound really lame, but it's like I got the Red Hot Chili Peppers Blood Sugar Sex Magic album, and then inside they had all these pictures of all the tattoos that they had, and they had cool tattoos. And I'm like, oh, you could get anything. You could get something cool. You don't have to get like, you know, like a skull with like a rose and a gun. You could actually get something kind of cool and creative and unique. So that kind of made me think. I thought, well, I know myself, and I know that I'll get at least one tattoo in my life. I just kind of knew that from like, if I never, you know, just for the experience, I knew I'd have at least one. So I got my first tattoo, my first like sort of tattoo. So it was actually my second tattoo, but me and my buddy Tommy had a band together, and we hand poked tattoos on each other. So I was getting that one covered up with my first tattoo, which was like a skull with snakes around it, which is also, ironically, I was just talking about how stupid that is, and then I got a skull with snakes. But it was only because the guy that did my tattoo couldn't do the World Industries Rocco Bear. It's like the devil Winnie the Pooh, but it's like he couldn't do that. So I had to pick something out of his book. So I'm like, that looks cool, I'll take it, you know?
There you go.
And so that one's been covered up since then. But that kind of like started me along the path of like, well, I was like, I remember getting the first tattoo, and I'm like, I'm never getting a tattoo again. I'm like, this hurts so much. I'm never doing this again. And like a week later, I came back and got another tattoo. And then it started kind of fueling a bit of an addiction where I'm like, I really started liking it. And I thought, well, I like tattoos, I'll get more, you know? And at the same time, I was in my grade 12 art class, and I got stuck in art class by accident. Like I didn't want to be in art class, but I think I wanted to be in a music class, but I might have checked off the wrong box or something. So I ended up going to art class, and the teacher was super nice. I remember in grade 9, she intimidated me because she was super mean. But when I came back for grade 12, she was super happy to see me, and it kind of became like a really good advocate for me because I was like getting in trouble a lot at school and like not going anywhere. And so she would be the person that would be talking to all the other teachers and trying to get them to give me a chance. So anyhow, I was in my grade 12 art class, and I know we're kind of rambling here, and I thought, well, if I do good in this class, maybe I'll pursue art. And I got the highest mark that I ever got in school, which was almost a 90. I think it was like an 89. And I mean, I didn't even try. So, I mean, that was pretty good because I wasn't a good student back then. But it kind of fueled like an obsession with me because like once you start to kind of like, I find that's how I learn anyways. Like if I care about something and I'm excited about it, then I'll learn everything I can about it. So that kind of started fueling this idea like, well, I could pursue art. And then I thought, well, then I could be a tattoo artist. So I started at the same time tattooing all my friends, building machines, tattooing my friends. And that kind of fueled that, like, that's kind of when I decided I wanted to be a tattoo artist. And at the time, again, I didn't think it would ever get, like, there's times now where I look at the pieces that I'm working on and I could never have imagined back then that I could ever do something like that. Like it's beyond, it's years ago, it was beyond what I ever thought I could possibly do, you know? And it's just that evolution of like constantly learning and trying to be better and better and better and better. And you look at yourself, like even when I look at these paintings that I did like, you know, 15 years ago, you have in your wall, it's like that stuff, you know, like it's leaps and bounds above all that stuff. You know, at the time, I thought they were great, but you know, it always gets better. And that's kind of like, so it is kind of cool. You know, I look back now and I think like, wow, it's been, you know, it's quite the journey, I guess, but.
That's awesome. Yeah, these paintings that I have, unfortunately, you guys can't see them on the cameras, but I've had these at several different places that I've lived. I've always had these on my wall, and it's honestly a good reminder to basically like show me that you can do anything with your life, which is awesome because you've proved that, right? Like you wanted to be a tattoo artist, and you did it, and you're definitely one of the best around here, at least that's for sure. And yeah, it's a good reminder, right? So, at what age did you start drawing then?
That goes back to probably, whenever you could pick up a pencil, I guess. But I became obsessed with it probably in the 5th or 6th grade. Like I was drawing on my desk a lot when I was a kid and getting in trouble for it. But that was just out of boredom because like school is boring. And I mean, it still is boring. Like you're spending a lot of time learning about stuff that you don't care about. It's kind of the opposite of how to like actually engage people. Like it's like making them sit at a table and listen to somebody talk about something they don't care about. And so, but I was really into skateboarding. Probably in the 6th grade, 7th grade, I got into skating like big time. And all the art on the skateboards was what got me really interested in drawing. Because I was trying to emulate all those designs that I thought were so cool, like the VCJ, like Powell Peralta graphics. And I still love it. Like I still have them on my wall this day. Like I have a collection of boards at home, and I have that Rodney Mullen board up at work. I can look at it every day because it just kind of really fuels that, like, kind of connects you to why you started in the first place.
Yeah.
And they're perfect outline drawings, and there's just something like about the balance of like making something like capturing the details but making it super simple. So that's kind of when I started drawing like kind of like more seriously, I guess. I would have been like in the 6th or 7th grade. But I mean, even then, it was just like more doodles than anything. I didn't really take it seriously until until I started getting into tattooing. That's when I started trying to make the drawings better and actually thinking about the shapes I was trying to create. More than just skateboarding skeletons like I used to do on my desk and get in trouble for every day.
Yeah. Do you think that skateboarding had a big impact on you learning to draw?
Yeah, and I mean it's had an impact on my whole life. I've been doing it for like most of my life now. Like I think I started when I was 12, and at this point I'm like in my mid 40s, and I still skate every other day or as much as I can. And it's not that it's there's something about it that I fell in love with when I was younger, and I realize it's changed for me now. Like it's there's something more about it, about progression and like learning tricks, and it's more of a personal goal. It's always been kind of about achieving personal goals, but like back then it was kind of like a little bit of hanging out and it was cool. But now it's about like, I guess it's still about hanging out and being cool, but I set goals for myself and I purposely try to do tricks that I don't know how to do so that I can learn how to do them. And I feel like there's like, it's kind of like, 'cause I have that obsessive nature, and like I find the same thing with like everything I do. So it goes into like the snowboarding, the video game stuff, or like the tattooing, where I find something that I latch onto and obsess over, whether it's painting or any of that other stuff. So that's kind of, I guess, definitely probably had a little bit to do with skating. Plus skating lets you see the world differently. Like I think that's the big thing, is that you see the world when you're a skateboarder as it could be, like the potential. Like you see a set of stairs and you don't think, oh, this is just for walking down. You're like, oh, I could jump down that, or I could jump down this and then hit that thing and then do this. Like there's more, like you see the world more as like it's for the potential. And so I think that kind of made me realize, I think what really made me realize that I wanted to draw and be a tattoo artist was probably working at McDonald's and working a crappy job and wearing a uniform and just thinking like, I don't want to ever do this. And like how can I do something where it doesn't feel like I'm going to work every day? And I think tattooing kind of always felt like that for me, where I didn't feel like I was working. I just felt like I was, I still feel like I'm going and I'm obsessed and having fun with what I'm doing. And like the nature of it has gotten a little more about perfection for me, where, as younger, it used to be about doing cool designs, and now it's like, it's about doing cool designs, but I want them to be as perfect as I can make them, which is, it's like when you don't achieve that goals, I mean, for me, as perfect as I can make it is probably like indistinguishable to other people. But I mean, there's that like, that 5% of like people that are really into tattoos that would be like, oh, you could have done this differently or done that better. I know I kind of I critique my work a lot, because I always want it to be better. If you look at it and you think it's the best, then you're never going to get better. So if you look at all your work and think, well, how can I make this better? How can this be, like I achieve this really well? But, for the next time I do something like this, how do I do a better version of it?
Yeah, I find it's a very important trait to have, right? Like, even when I was finishing the last BMX DVD that I made, a lot of the times I'd be sitting there just looking at stuff, and I would just be like, oh my god, I hate this so much because this could be done so much better. But at that point, you do have to. I feel like sometimes you're your worst enemy when it comes to like your own stuff.
You're
right?
going to be your worst critic, yeah.
Yeah.
And I find like I got to that point where like it's become a lot more serious, than it was like in the 90s. Tattooing was less serious for me. Like it's kind of in a weird way, it was kind of, now it's become way more serious. And I have a lot more responsibility. I got a lot of things on my shoulders now, so I want to make sure that especially when you run your own business and you've built a reputation, you got like people that have followed you for years. Like it's become like it's a lot more serious now. And it's not a lot of walk-ins anymore. Like when I first started, it was a lot of walk-ins, and now it's a lot more about like you're booking months down the line, and people are, the expectations. At least I put on myself. If someone's waited 6 months, I want to make sure that everything I do for them is above and beyond what they could expect. And so that's kind of where the of course it has to be a serious thing, and it becomes something that you have to do like 6 days a week, even when you're not at work, like you're drawing tattoos, or I'm at my, I'm at the shop like probably 7 days a week, even if I'm not, even if we're not open and I'm not tattooing, I'm still there drawing tattoos, or, thinking. Now it's like, thinking about how can I make this shop flow better, and how can I like improve, like how do I keep my, like how do I best utilize my employees and make them, use their strengths, to help grow the business or whatever. So
That's awesome. Do you think that school is important to becoming a tattoo artist at all? I know that lately a lot of people do go to art school and everything, but like yourself, you've done great and you've gone like so far with it, and you haven't even finished high school.
Yeah.
And
I'm a high school dropout, but at like the 12th grade. But I think that it can be important. Like I think that for me, since I never went to art school, I felt like especially when I was an apprentice, there was lots of people going to art school and learning and becoming tattoo artists. So I felt like I had to compete with those people. So I obsessed over drawing, and I drew nonstop. I still do. I still bring a hardcover sketchbook everywhere I go, and I don't get a chance to break it out and draw as much as I used to, but like I used to draw everywhere I went. I would take, if I was waiting in the dentist office, I would draw something. If I was, out for dinner with friends, I'd bring a sketchbook and just draw, if I was anywhere. And I think that kind of, I think if you have that kind of mentality that you always want to learn. So I never stopped learning, because I never had someone give me a diploma and be like, okay, or a degree, and say, well, you're done. You've learned everything. So I always kept trying to learn more and more and more. But I definitely feel like at this point, the level of skill that's involved in tattooing, it's probably a good idea to have an art degree or to have some kind of art training, obviously. And there's certain things that you can't teach, and that's something I've been learning lately. Like you can't teach people to have an eye for design, and you can't teach them. Like I used to think it was a skill that you could just learn. That if you gave people the right like pieces and said, this is how you color things, this is how you design things, that they could just pick it up. But I've started to realize that that's not the case, and that if you don't have an eye for design, you got a lot of work to do. So it's like, I think that if you want to be a tattoo artist now, definitely school is probably going to help. It's not as, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but it definitely will come in handy, like, and I still took art lessons. Like I still did life drawing. I did portrait drawing classes, like I got not that long ago, like maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And just to kind of improve your skills, right? There's always something. And I found that with painting especially, is like, you can always like learn a lot just from like, even though it's not tattooing, I'm looking at, I'm doing oil paintings, and I'm thinking, well, there's something you can take away from that and bring to tattooing, and vice versa. But a lot of times, it's kind of more of a playground, because you don't have to make something perfect, and you're not doing something for somebody. So it's not like somebody bringing you like a subject matter and saying, I have all these things that you need to make into a design. you're just doing like you're doing whatever you want, and that's a kind of a cool thing to be able to just kind of play and kind of like try different things. I think that's also pretty important to tattooing. I think it's important for everything you do. It's like because you learn by doing a lot of times, and with tattooing, it's like you can't just like practice those things on people. So you got to kind of have a nice like kind of some other medium. Plus it's nice to to be an artist and not just be a tattoo artist. But
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of artists, so you actually do a lot of paintings as well.
Yep.
When did you get into doing paintings, and what style of paintings do you do nowadays?
the paintings started, I mean, probably around this, probably as long as I've been tattooing. Before I started tattooing, I guess, but not really to the degree. Like, it wasn't important to me as it is now, like to put out, to keep working. I do kind of an in-between. Like, I do a lot of oil painting, and I like oil painting. I like it a lot. There's something about being connected to like something that's classic, right? So like oil paintings are like a classic kind of medium. Like, it's not like, and I don't know. I like that, and I find it's really versatile. Like, I can do a lot with it, and I like the slow drawing, so you can kind of blend things more and layer things a little bit better. And then there's watercolor paintings, which I do a lot of as well. I do that that's usually a little more for tattooing purposes, but that's like the quick, like you can sit down and get it done in one day kind of thing. So there's kind of two sides to it, right? Like, you can do it quickly and have something like a finished product really, within one night, where an oil painting takes months to do. But I like the fact that it takes months to do is kind of like, I find like I'll go into a project and I want to say something with this painting, and then kind of a couple as it starts to evolve, you're getting into like different meanings, and now it means something else. Now it doesn't mean, or there's more layers to it, So I find like I find the oil paintings are kind of more of a journey, I guess, if that makes any sense.
No, I can completely agree with that. I definitely feel the same about like long video projects. That's why I never make anything very short. I know it's not like the same in comparison, but like the time length is around the same, where you are sitting down and you're working towards it for a long time. It's not just something that takes a night to do. And I think that it's kind of important it should be like a quality that most people try and have, is just something that's going to take you a long time to do, that you can really focus on and really learn how to do it just through that. And I think that is probably why, like you said, with your oil paintings, that's a big part of it. So
I think that there's a lot to be said just for like the like discipline that it takes to sit down every week and do something, and sometimes I'll sit down and not know what I'm going to do that day, and just kind of just start working on little sections, and then kind of watch, and then you start to get the ideas flowing a little more that way. And I mean, at the time right now, I'm having a bit of a block for what to do next as far as like inspiration goes for the paintings. Like, I've kind of found a lot of the things that I wanted to say. Like, I got into painting a lot of these oil paintings that I do now because I want them to be fun to look at. It sounds kind of cheesy, but I mean, the world's already depressing. So I'm like, and then so a few years ago I started I want them to be fun. I want them to be pink dinosaurs that bleed candy. I want them to be things that people like looking at. And then in the last couple of years, I've wanted to have a more of a deeper meaning to a lot of that stuff. But it starts to get a little depressing, because the world, you don't need it everywhere, right? We already know, like the problems with this world, or like, with the way things are going. So maybe you don't need to have somebody else, comment on it, because I feel like you're kind of getting it. You're everywhere you look, people are commenting on it. So maybe something that's kind of fun to look at isn't too bad either. I mean, there's still kind of, some hidden meaning behind all that stuff, but like not to the same like direct, like, and I guess you don't have to like beat people over the head with it,
yeah, no, that makes sense. I think with Instagram nowadays too, you see so much negativity just through like social media and just everything like that. But it's kind of nice to see something like what you're saying, where it's just positive, right? It's just fun to look at.
Yeah.
Do you think that Instagram is a good tool for up and coming tattoo artists right now?
Definitely. Definitely. Right now it is, for sure, right now. Don't rely on it, because 5 years from now, do you think Instagram's going to be around? Probably not. I mean, it'll be around, but it'll be maybe around in the same capacity as Facebook. Maybe not. Maybe it'll grow and more people will use it. But I am assuming it's going to kind of start to slowly peter off, and people are going to be kind of reaching it. I think that a lot of apps are becoming more streamlined now anyways. Like I'm on Tattoo, which is like a tattooing kind of like Instagram for tattoos stuff, which is kind of okay, but it's just all tattoo stuff, right? I think that those things are going to start to pop up where things are going to be more, it's going to be less of everything and just kind of more directed towards one or two, like two things. I think the best thing is to always still have a website. I think if you're still learning, I think if you're still trying to gain clients, Instagram is a great place right now. And I mean, definitely right now for exposure, but it's also the same problem I found like in the 90s with the tattoo magazines, where because I really wanted my work to be in magazines. And then once it kind of got into the magazines, you start to realize that people aren't coming from Amsterdam to get tattooed by you. Like the people that are coming to get tattooed by you are the people that, for the most part, have seen your work. They've talked, like it's always been word of mouth. So it's the people that see your work and talk to your other clients. And those are the guys that are coming to get work done from you for the most part. And I think those are the clients that I like having anyways. Like, I feel like when someone comes to me and they're not really aware of what I do, it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like they, the best clients are the ones that have seen your work and know what you do. And they're kind of like, this is what I like. This is where, this is the pieces that I like, kind of, this is what I want to do. Just kind of throw it together in a nice image.
Yeah, that's. I think you're definitely right there. What is your favorite part about tattooing?
There's a lot of favorite parts, and I feel like a lot of what I like about it is meeting with people and hearing their stories and just kind of connecting with people. And I feel like that's kind of the thing that like a lot of tattoo artists kind of miss that point. I think a lot of people really focus on making some great piece of art that they can take a picture of. And I mean that is important, like don't get me wrong, but I mean there is something about talking with people and like hearing their stories, and like especially when you can, like, the whole point of me doing this, like when I started tattooing, was I wanted to do something where I felt like I made a difference every day. And a lot of times, like sometimes you are just doing like fun tattoos for people that don't matter, like they just want to have something cool on them. But then there's other people that have, like, it has a deeper meaning to them, and like you're giving them some kind of closure, or maybe just sitting and chatting with people. And that's kind of like one of my favorite parts of tattooing. I mean, there's so many. You gotta love it for the little steps, anyways. Like it's all about like it's not the big, this like in life, right? It's not the big moments. It's always the small little things that just kind of accumulate every day that make you have a good life. Like it's not like the one great thing that happened to you every week that you live for. It's always the little moments day to day. So I mean, it's like talking to people is awesome, creating something that they love is awesome, and just seeing something that flows really nice on a person, like it fits their body, it fits their personality. I love that. And I just love being like that nerdy kind of like tattoo part of it, of just like trying to make something perfect and something that fits on the body and looks great. That's also kind of like really important, but it's not as, I don't want it to ever overshadow like that relationship you build with your clients, because that's kind of the whole point of doing it. Like if you just want to create a great piece of art, you can do that. Like put it on, you can put that on a wall or on canvas or something, but you're putting it on a person, so you should probably, at least, like get into it a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Care about it, right? So
yeah.
How difficult was it to get clientele started? And when people actually met you, what would you think they really thought? Like, and adding on to that, how many followed you from Zaps and Torah to where you are now?
All that stuff it's kind of tricky. So So when I started tattooing, you would have thought as an apprentice it'd be hard to get people interested in getting tattooed by an apprentice, but that wasn't the case. Even in the 90s. Like in the 90s, it was still busy. Like tattooing was busy. It's not like it is now, but it was busy enough. I got a lot of clients just from like being at the shop all the time, doing walk-ins, and a lot of the walk-ins were stuff like, you just draw it on the fly. Like they'd be like, I want this or that, and you just sketch it out, and then if you can draw something in front of somebody, they kind of trust you a little bit more. So, and I really enjoyed that part of it anyways, and that's the one thing I find now where I'm drawing a lot of the stuff on my own, like in a back room, because you're waiting months and months to get an appointment, where it used to be you would just sit across the table from somebody and draw it right in front of them. And so you could kind of just show them the picture and go, what do you think of this? And they'd be like, maybe more of this, maybe less of that, where it's, now I don't have that same give and take, which is kind of a bummer, but I feel like it was equal parts difficult and easy to get clients back then. Cause like there's a part of me that, I was a kid, I was probably 20, 21 years old back then when I was learning to tattoo and when I was tattooing people in a world of like, I guess a lot of like older people that, they're not going to trust some like kid to do it. But I mean, there's also a lot of young people getting tattooed that would definitely want you to tattoo them. So you'd always have like that kind of group. And I thought it was kind of funny because, there was a day when me and Al were tattooing, and he was tattooing like biker stuff on a biker, and I was tattooing skateboard stuff on a skateboarder. And I thought, like, this is kind of the way it is, right? Like, it's the way it should be, And it's kind of funny because when I was an apprentice, I remember I would, roll up to work on my skateboard, and there'd be Harleys out front, and, you were just like, they were all with mullets and tight pants, listening to Iron Maiden, and they would always kind of like, you always feel like, oh, here I am with my skateboard or whatever. And then it's kind of funny how like 20 years later, I'm pulling up to Torah and there's all these Harleys out back and they're all bikers and I'm pulling in on my skateboard and I'm like, man, nothing's changed. After 20 years, it's still the same shit, but it's pretty cool. And I think a lot of my clients follow me from Owen Sound. Like, I definitely appreciate that, Like, it's a long drive, first of all. It's a 2.5 hour drive. There's lots of tattooers there's a lot of tattooers now that are really good. Like, you don't have to come and see me. Like, back in the olden days, there was a handful of good tattoo artists, so you kind of had to. It wasn't the same as it is now. Like, there's a lot of great tattoo artists. So when people, I always appreciate it when people come to see me. It's kind of one of those things. Like, when I got into it, it was busy, but not like it is now. So you kind of appreciate everybody that got a tattoo, where I feel like a lot of the people getting into it now just expect people to walk in the door and want a tattoo. So, but a lot of them follow me from Zaps, and like, I think like most of my clients from Torah just follow me to my new shop, and that's cool too, and that's something I'm starting to learn is not just to appreciate, but like, if someone wants to get tattooed by you, they'll follow you. That's kind of the way it goes. And like, I think it used to be like, we would look at it like, you don't get tattooed in a different shop. Like if I had a client and you got tattooed by somebody else, you'd be like, what is this trader doing? But nowadays you realize that, or at least I realize, it's more about like people collecting art and there's something cool about having pieces from a bunch of different people, I guess, too. But so I appreciate it when they follow me. I appreciate that. Hands down.
Yeah, of course. So talking about Zaps and Torah there, you opened Wonderland Studios 3 or 4 years ago, I believe. And do you think owning your own space has helped you with tattooing? And can you tell us a little bit about why you started Wonderland and how it kind of came to be?
Yeah. Okay, so owning your own shop, there's a misconception that when you own your own shop, you're your own boss. And you can take off whenever you want. And you don't have to, you can just close down and not come to work whatever day you don't want to go to work. And I feel like that's not really the case. Like or at least, I found that now you just have 2 jobs. So now you got to be tattooing nonstop and drawing tattoos all the time, but also somehow running a business. So now I've gotten like, I got 2 jobs that I got to squeeze into the time that I used to do 1 job that I could barely do at once, But having a team of like good people behind me really helps, like having Audrey work the front desk, and that helps immensely. And having Deacon around helps like you wouldn't believe. Like, because he's also into it, and he's been, we've been working together for almost 20 years. So it's kind of one of those things that, like, it's something, when you have a team of people you can trust and rely on, it makes it a lot easier for sure. And the whole thing with like leaving Torah and starting this place was, I could have stayed at Torah forever. I liked Torah. I still love Torah. Jamie is such a good tattoo artist, and I was inspired constantly by him. And Brian is so great, and so it's the same thing. I could have been there forever, just kept being inspired and seeing all that stuff. But it's not really. At some point, you realize, I'm in my 40s, and I know I want more. I don't want to just be a tattoo artist working at a shop. Like I had a vision of what I wanted my shop to look like. I kind of knew probably from the beginning that I was going to open my own shop eventually. So I kind of knew how I wanted to look. I wanted to be more of an art gallery, less of like a traditional tattoo shop with flash all over the walls. I wanted something to look more artsy, more art gallery, something, a place that you could take your mom to or your grandma to, where everybody could feel comfortable. Because I know that it's kind of tough, even as a tattoo artist walking into a tattoo shop, it can be a little bit intimidating sometimes. So I wanted a place that felt welcoming for everybody. So, not that Torah didn't feel welcoming, but in my head, I had a vision of how I wanted it to look and how I wanted this space to kind of be like gallery type related. And it's worked out. I looked around every once in a while I look around and I realize that everything that I dreamed about years ago has all come true. It just happened in baby steps. Like, it didn't happen overnight. Like, the stuff you were thinking about 10 years ago is, you look around, you're like, it's all here. And that's kind of cool. That's really cool to be able to do that, Yeah, so that's kind of why I started it. I wanted to do my own thing at some point. And as you realize, like, you're not getting any younger, and I don't look old, but I'm in my mid 40s, so you kind of like, you think to yourself, well, I got 20 years of tattooing left in me probably, so when am I going to do it when I'm in my 50s? Probably not. So it's like kind of like a now or never situation. And you got to take that plunge. And like, to be honest with you, I thought it was going to be a lot harder, because I didn't expect everybody to follow. Like, I appreciate it, but I kind of went in with this idea that some clients would follow me, but a lot of them probably would just continue to go to Torah, and that I'd have to like, really hustle to get more clientele. And I was prepared for that, and I kind of thought, like, after the first, I in my head, I thought I have enough money to float me for 3 months, and after that, then who knows? But it ended up working out really well and continuing to work out really well. So that's good. Obviously it's really good, and it's nice to see that, like, there is something satisfying about doing your own thing, and it's your own. There's a sense of pride that comes with building your own thing. I look around the shop and I think, like, all this stuff is here because I imagined it and I made it happen. And I think that's kind of cool. I think that's kind of the takeaway for a lot of things. I don't think that people really get that like, all the things that you enjoy in life, like, somebody thought of it and then they've pursued it, so like your iPhone or whatever, the cool thing that you enjoy was someone imagined it and then made it happen. And so I kind of feel like, that's how I kind of live my life, is like, if I can imagine it and I can pursue it, there's a possibility of making things happen for yourself. So, I know it's not quite the same as a tattoo shop. It gets kind of a little more, I guess, broader, like in a broader sense, that like, you kind of just have to follow your heart. And, like, even if you fall flat in your face, at least you tried, right? Like, if you don't try, you're not going to succeed at all. Like, you had your bets against yourself. Like, you're 100%, you're not going to achieve your goals if you never try to achieve them. So I always felt like, it's like, even if I open this shop and it fails, at least I fucking tried. And that's better than not trying at all. And, luckily for me, it didn't fail. So that's good.
Yeah, it's been succeeding for quite a while now, right? Like, you guys have quite the wait in order to get a tattoo, which I know it can kind of be annoying for people, like having to wait so long, but it's definitely worth the wait in this case. And I know that you are actually working on trying to get your schedule down a little bit to try and get more people in as much as possible, but you're already tattooing almost 6 days a week. Like most times you take Monday off, but you are squeezing in clients like here and there sometimes. So
even on Mondays or Sundays sometimes, or after work, like this Friday after work, we're doing charity for the kids from KCI. They
nice round two then, eh?
Yeah, round two. So the whole idea is that they raise money for like the students raise money for children's cancers. Like I don't know if it's research or what it's for, but they raise money for children's cancer, and then the whole bet is like every time they raise $1,000, a teacher will get a KCI tattoo. And I think they surpassed what they ever thought was possible. So we had to break it into 2 different days because there's so many people to tattoo. So I got 3 more teachers that I got a tattoo Friday night after work, and I'm looking forward to it. You know, because like honestly, to be able to give back a little bit, it's pretty cool. You know, and like it's pretty cool that cancer affects everybody. So it's pretty cool to be able to at least use your skills and your time to to be able to donate that for something bigger than yourself, I guess.
Yeah. So something else that you guys do for a charity event is once in a while you'll head off to Ottawa and you'll do a charity event at New Moon. So what is that about? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, so my friends at New Moon. So New Moon is owned by Dan Alliston. He's like a legend in tattooing, Canadian tattoo legend. I heard about him a lot when I was an apprentice. He was in the magazines. He was like there was probably 5 guys in Canada that were really well known. He was one of them. And like back in the 90s, same with Jamie Azumi, which I ended up getting to work with him too, so that was cool. But so Dan owns New Moon, and whenever I get a chance to go there and do a guest spot, I'm always super stoked. And over the years I've known the guy for probably 15 or 20 years, so you end up like building these friendships with people. So I was there doing a guest spot, and they had an artist that was working there that ended up like quitting. Instead, they had a charity event coming up, I think like 2 weeks later, and there's only the 3 of them to tattoo at this event. So I was like, well, I'm gonna come in. I was like, I'll make the trip and I'll come in and help you, because they usually have people lined up around the block to get these pre-drawn like tattoo designs, or like little 15-minute jobbies. It takes like you charge them like $50 or $100. I don't know how much they charge, but and all that goes again to I think it goes to men's cancers. But so I was like, well, I'll come and help you. Like if you need a guy to help you, like hell yeah, I'll be here. So I made the trip. Through a snowstorm to show up there, and I think I ended up doing like 15 tattoos that day, maybe. I thought that I knocked it out of the park, but my friend Milana did like 22 or something. So I come in and I bring all my colors, and the first tattoo is taking me 45 minutes to do because I'm adding shading and all these like little bits of color to it. And they're like, these are supposed to take 15 minutes. Like you don't, like you're going, like you don't need to go above and beyond like doing all this extra shading and color and stuff like that. And because it's flash stuff, but I've always been of the mindset that you take the flash and you make it way better. So I think I did like 15 that day, and it was pretty cool. And again, it's a thing of like when you can help out, like you probably should, especially for stuff like that. Like I have a pretty like blessed life, I think, for the most part. So like I'm healthy. I've been healthy forever, so far. Like I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do drugs. So I feel like, I'm in a pretty good position. My body's healthy. So, and I get to do what I love every day for a living. So, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty blessed and pretty lucky. So if I can do anything to help other people, then, I try to as much as I can, so when the opportunity arose, I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll be there and I'll help you out. And, then the next year when it came up again, they had that, it's like an annual event. I was like, yeah, I'm totally there. I was already like, that's the second year we did it was the 7 Deadly Sins. So I came up with a whole sheet of designs to do for it. And I'm like, I'll be there. I'll send you the designs and I'll be there. Hell yeah. And like, find me a spot. Like, even if you stick me in the corner somewhere, like, the more people I can help you get through the door, the better. And like, it's kind of funny because I think everybody has been touched by cancer, and like, it's, I've had a lot of people in the last couple of years. You see, you've had gone to a lot of funerals. You know what I mean? So you realize how short life is and how it can be over in an instant. So like, I really feel like, as I can do as much as I can to help other people, I try to, for the most part.
So something that I think with BMX, skateboarding, tattooing, just kind of any industry or any like thing like that is that it offers so much to you. And some people always feel like, they're going to give back and they're going to do all this stuff. And, maybe they get to the point where they think that tattooing owes them something or skateboarding owes them something. And I think to that it never, like, you could do everything you want to try and make it the best thing ever. You could change the entire scene, but it never owes you anything. And I love the fact that you do give back and that you do, you don't just think of yourself as just some like awesome tattoo artist. You actually do want to give back. You do want to help out. You do like to, do that kind of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because what happens is, I think early on in tattooing is that everybody comes up and tells you how great you are. Like, that's kind of how it goes, especially in a small town like Owen Sound. Like, a lot of people come up to you and they'll tell you how great you are, and you can let it go to your head, but after a while it gets really old. Like, it sounds kind of like it just gets, I don't want to say old, but you realize that you're just drawing pictures and you're not doing anything special, and like, the part for me that I really understand is that like, people work hard jobs every day. Like, they'll go and they'll do a bullshit job all day, every day, 6 days a week or whatever, to earn like money. And then they come to me and they give me that money to draw a picture on them that I would have drawn for free anyways. So I'm like, for the most part. So I'm like, I appreciate that. I take that to heart. Like, those people work real hard jobs. People are working outside in the hot sun every day, or, working in a factory. Like, I definitely feel like, I appreciate them coming to me with their money and trusting me to do something great for them. Right. But also, like, to be able to, like, I think that, all the people that I really look up to, I think, maybe 10 years ago, I think I had like an anger problem, and I started wanting to change, the person I was. I didn't like being quick to anger, if that makes, and like, I would think about the people that I look up to the most, like guys like Roddy Mullen, guys like Richard Feynman, like these guys that are like, they're kind of humble, like they're not like braggarts, right? Like, I think if you're great, you don't have to tell people about it. People will tell you, right? So you get a guy like that. Like, when you listen to Roddy Mullen, he invented everything in skateboarding, every trick that everybody does. And he never ever says, oh, I did all these things for you. He always, people say to him, you invented the ollie, you invented the kickflip. And he's like, oh, it's, he's like, I was just goofing around, and I realized if you kick the board a certain way, it flips over. And so I thought, well, I could probably land on it. And like, he's pretty humble about that. And I mean, there's something about that I think is really, I don't know, really great. Like, he gets it, I think. It sounds kind of, he gets it. Like, there's, I don't know. I guess, like, the people that I like the most aren't the people that constantly talk about themselves, right? If that makes any sense. It's the people that are passionate about something and talk about the thing they're passionate about, I guess, right? But
yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
So I guess that's kind of where that comes from, right? Like, I started to realize, like, like guys like David Suzuki probably don't flip out and yell at their kids, right? Or, or like, yell at their wife about something. So I was like, I don't want to be that guy. Like, I realized a long time ago, like you can be the person you want to be, and like any minute you can change it and you can turn it all around. So like, I quit drinking like almost 20 years ago. I had like, I think I was every night I was drinking and driving and, partying and having the time of my life and living the lifestyle. And I realized I didn't want to be that person anymore. I didn't want to be a guy who was smoking weed all the time and drinking every night. Like, especially when you're an adult, you're like, it got boring, for the most part. I'm like, I was in my, mid, I already had I think I already had you guys by then. So I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. Like, I would rather be a better influence on you guys. So I turned it around, you know, and then you start to realize that there's always ways to make yourself better, I guess. But, you know, and especially when you can see like how other people like empathize with other people, it kind of makes it a lot easier to be like, well, I want to be a, you know, I want to be a better, you know, I'd rather have people, I don't know. I just don't want to be, I don't want to be the person that people hate, I guess, because I'm arrogant or I'm an asshole to them, or like, you know, I don't know, I'd rather be that kind of person that's just kind of, there's something about humility, right? Where you can kind of see how far you have to go. I think that's the big thing, is that when you realize how far you still have to grow, you know, I think that's kind of the thing, right? But
No, that's very true. Thank you for mentioning all that. We're gonna be right back. This is My Town by Buck09, and then we've got another at least half an hour to talk. Enjoy. We're back. That was My Town by Bucko 9. I love that song. Great feels every time. Alrighty. So we already talked a little bit about how you became a tattoo artist. What hardships did you go through in your journey to becoming a tattoo artist? There's going to be a lot.
Well, I mean, tattooing itself, it's always that, like, you know, when you first start, it's like every week you want to quit, you know, because you feel like you suck. And then it's like every month eventually, and then every year, you know, and that's, you know, I was warned about that when I first started, like, you know, like the stuff that you think is awesome today, a year from now, you're going to look at it and be like, oh, that's so terrible. So there's like those kind of hardships. I kind of had like a lot of, like I said, it was way more fun in the 90s and it wasn't as serious. Like it felt like it was a little less serious. I just kind of worked with my friends every day and we had fun all the time. And, you know, eventually it became more like this is a job and we need to take this way more seriously. The hardships, who knows? Like I had went through, you know, the first time, I guess is like I would work nonstop as an apprentice. I would be at the shop till I had to not be there. So that could be like at 12 o'clock every night. That could be 3 a.m. Lots of times it was 3 a.m. Like we would just keep working until there was no one to tattoo anymore. And I mean, that kind of takes a toll on a person. It takes a toll on your relationships, right? So, I mean, that ends up like I go through all this stuff, you know, where you know, you know, kind of like it was part of the reason I think that killed the relationship, you know, with me and the mother of my kids, you know. So then you go through that whole thing of like being separated from your family, and that's a hard thing to go through because it's a really tough. It's tough to go when you're rudderless, right? And you're trying to figure out where the next direction is to go and what you need to do with your life. But the thing is, it gets easier. So it's kind of funny how like eventually tattooing became the constant in my life. So when other stuff in my personal life started falling apart, there was always tattooing. It was always there, you know? And eventually that's kind of like it's the one time where you don't have to worry about your problems. Like you can sit there and just draw a picture and focus on that. You don't have to think about what's going on in your life. So I think that, you know, as far as the hardships go in tattooing, it's kind of been the opposite. Like tattooing has only gotten better, especially with time now. Like it used to be you had to solder all your own needles and mix all your own inks. And, you know, like if the needles weren't consistent, you'd have like one great liner, and then the next time you used the liner, it was terrible. So your tattoos weren't as consistent. So he kind of taught you how to make things consistently and make them better. But now it's like everything is pre-made for you, you know, like everything, like it's a different world when you look at the way that we do tattoos now, like the equipment and the industry behind it. So, I mean, in that regard, it's like the hardships I think are behind us. There were times like, you know, when things were leaner back in the olden days, like in the, you know, like the late 90s, early 2000s, where like, you know, you might go a month without doing a tattoo. You know, especially when you're learning, you're first starting out, like you don't have a reputation, you don't have a bunch of clientele, so you go a long time without doing a tattoo. And now it's like that, you know, I can't imagine that ever happening. You know, I hope that never happens, you know, because, you know, you build your life around having like a certain, you know, consistent income, stable income. But, you know, like those times are long gone as far as I'm concerned. Like life has gotten better. And I don't need as much as I used to, you know. I guess that if that makes any sense, like I've realized that, like, you know, less is more, you know, as long as I have a roof over my head, you know, my bills are paid, you know, I think that's all that really matters, you know.
No, that's completely true. It's interesting because I feel like learning all of these things when you first started makes you a better tattoo artist, including like making your own needles, everything like that. And I feel like it kind of takes a toll on people that are trying to learn, like apprentices, and now they don't have to do that stuff anymore, so it doesn't really matter to them. Do you feel like when you're first starting, you should try and learn the history of tattooing, including how to make your own needles and everything else like that?
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's kind of funny because my goal was to teach my apprentices to solder their own needles. And I think about 5 years ago, I threw out all my needle making equipment because I didn't want to ever have to do it again. So I was like, oh, I don't even have the stuff to make needles with anymore. I think there's only like one supply company that actually sells loose needles and needle jigs and stuff. So I mean, it's kind of a lost art, I think, at this point. But I find like you're not only when you're soldering needles, it's not just a chore that you have to do, and it teaches you to be consistent. It's like all the needles all have to be the same, but it also teaches you like what those needles are doing, right? If that makes any sense. Like you're kind of learning like you know, before you even like have to use those needles, you're like, okay, so every tattoo you need to have like, you know, this liner, this shader, this, you know, you kind of realize what they're all for. So I think it definitely helps to solder needles when you're starting to get into it. And it's funny because when I was an apprentice, like the first sheet of flash I had to color, first day as an apprentice, you know, it was like, when you go home tonight, color the sheet of flash, bring it home colored tomorrow. It was Ed Hardy Eagles. And at the time I was like, nobody's going to want to get this old ass crap, you know, because that's what I thought. It looked like a bunch of, you know, I'm like, that's old fashioned. Like, who the fuck wants that? You know, and it's funny because like 10 years later, everybody wanted that kind of stuff, you know, like that old style tattoo, everybody wanted it. But like back then, I was like, who would ever want this? But I colored it anyways. And like, that's the one thing is like, if I could get my hands on that sheet of flash, I don't know, you know, like I've had people working at Zaps before where I'm like, if I could just get that sheet of flash, right? I'm like, just smuggle that sheet of flash to me. Like, just get that in my hands. Like, that's the one thing I really want to have, like, framed. I would cherish that now. But, like, you know, I think that, you know, at the time, I didn't really appreciate the history of it, you know, especially when you're young. You're like, this is, you know, whatever. This isn't cool. Like, you know, like Japanese tattooing. You're like, this isn't cool. This is, like, old-fashioned. Like, cool stuff is, like, you know, things that are all skewed and have, like, weird perspective on it. And it should look like graffiti or it should look like this or that. But now it's like, you know, I realize that like all of that stuff, especially that traditional Japanese stuff, like there's a beauty and it's timeless, like timeless and beautiful. And like, you know, they've been doing it that way and refining those images for centuries, you know, so there's something really great about that, you know, and the more I do it, the more I realize that those things, there is something really great about that history, you know. And I love the history anyways. I'm nerdy about that stuff, and I always find like, you know, it seems like long ago, like, you know, like in the 30s and 40s and 50s, whatever, like those days were like, you had to be tough to be a tattoo artist. Like you were punching people out every day, and like, you know, it's kind of a different world now for tattooing, that's for sure. But like I still love reading about those old times, and like, you know, I've got to meet, you know, a handful of like old timers. And like they had it hard back in those days. Like they were making their own machines, but they had acetate stencils. Like it was a different world for them. And there wasn't like a bunch of supply companies that would give you stuff. Even when I learned, like there was like, everything was still a safely guarded secret. Like when you were mixing gray washes, you would watch the guy that was doing your tattoo and you'd see how many drops of black he put in with his water to see like how he made those nice gray washes. Or you'd have a guy come, you'd have somebody that knew something, you know, that traveled, that would come up and say, hey, I'm using this new kind of needle. And you're like, and it's funny how back in those days before like it was widespread knowledge on the internet, you're like, how did we learn anything? Like somehow we all learned about these needles that just kind of like travel in circles, but or, you know, you'll learn how to like make a perfect gray wash, but it all kind of, it got around. But now you buy your gray washes already pre-mixed, you know. And the irony is that you still have to like, you know, add black to them here or there, you know, like there's a lot of them end up healing out almost the same tone. So you always like those old gray washes we mixed ourselves, I never had to go back in and darken up sections. Like it always, you know, it seems like now I got to go back in and darken some up, or like they're not as consistent as they used to be when you made it yourself, which is, you know, so I don't know if it was a hardship or not, but it was definitely like a different world back then, you know, and here we are now.
Yeah, exactly. So here's a question for you. When you had kids, were you excited for one day to be able to tattoo them?
You know, definitely not just to tattoo them, but like it's all kind of like you daydream about all that stuff, right? Like I remember carrying you around to Pizza, you know, in like a little stroller or whatever, you know, when you're just a little dude, and just being so stoked that, you know, one day, you know, like I'll get you a skateboard and we'll do all these things. And like, you know, it's kind of funny how you know, there was a time when we were at Glen Eden on the chairlift, and I was just like, I looked over and I was like, this is everything that I dreamed about when you were little, you know. And it's like it happened in the blink of an eye. Like that's the thing with like, you know, like it's just like that. And then suddenly you're growing up, right? And like we were on the chairlift snowboarding together. I'm like, this is everything I wanted when you were little. I'm like, we'll go snowboarding together, we'll do all these things. And I kind of assumed, I didn't assume you guys would get tattoos, but I didn't assume you wouldn't. Like I was like, maybe they'll get tattoos, maybe they won't. And it's really cool that we were able to do that, you know. And I like, now I look at it and I think, well, you guys, you know, you have a piece of me everywhere you go. Like there's always like, even because like chances are I'm not going to be around forever, so I'm like, at least you have something from me, you know. Or whatever you're like, you know, if you're feeling like shit or like when things are going wrong, you can think, well, somebody, you know, you got a piece right there, you know, like somebody cares about you, I guess. So, you know, and it's kind of corny to say that, but like that's kind of cool. I think that's kind of cool. You always have a piece, you know, that there'll always be some trace of me there for you. And like, yeah, definitely. That's kind of it was pretty cool. I didn't realize you guys would get tattoos as much as you did. And it's cool too that you know, I made you guys wait till you're older anyways to get them. And now you have like good work, you know, like the stuff I was working, you know, I was doing when I first started didn't look as good. So it's like, it's nice. It's still nice to see, you know, and most people will know this, you know, they probably know this about me, but like, if you have a tattoo, I don't look at your face, like I look at your tattoos, you know. So like, it's nice to look at the work that I'm doing, that I've done on you, and go, oh, that's cool, you know, I like how that turned out. Or like, you know, I do the same thing with everybody that has a tattoo. Even if I didn't do it, I look at it and be like, oh man, that's cool. Or, you know, like why would that guy do that color? Like why wouldn't they do this or that? So
Yeah, we were literally talking about my tattoos and the color on them earlier and how they showed up, and it's still like, I've had this one since I was about 17, and the color is still the exact same. It hasn't changed at all, and that was about 6 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's definitely a little while back, but
It's a lot of blues and reds and purples.
yeah.
And like those colors tend to stick around. Like the oranges and yellows tend to fall out like over time. That's what I was saying earlier, like all the yellows kind of gone from the skateboard, like all the flames or look like they're skin colored now, but you know, it is what it is. You know, like that's just, it's the nature of the beast. I think that's I don't think it's the brand of tattoo ink. I think it's just the pigments themselves, but who knows?
Yeah, I definitely it's really cool to see that like myself and Harmony are just so into tattoos in general. Like we both have a decent amount. I've definitely got a lot more than her, but I'm also a couple years older, and I've lived with you, right? So like we were able to do it kind of whenever. For Harm, we kind of have to book it down the line and everything, but
Yeah, and I don't think she wants to do full sleeves and stuff yet. You know?
yeah.
So I think that maybe one day she'll kind of be like, oh, I want to do my full sleeve, or I want to do this or that. But I think at this point she's kind of like, she's collecting pieces, and like she has some of my favorite tattoos, which is kind of cool. Like both of you guys do. Like it's funny how many people come in and look at the books in the waiting room and see your octopus, and they're just like, oh, I love that tattoo. I'm like, that's my kid. You know, that's like, you know, it's like, whenever I tell people, like, that's what a good sleeve is. Like, a good sleeve is like one thing, you know, like it's one main piece and then a couple little pieces around it to kind of like like a bit of, you know, decoration, I guess, or window dressing around it. Like, I think that people think that if they're getting their whole arm tattooed, they need to put like 50 different things into it, and that doesn't end up looking good. It looks like it's hard to tell what you're looking at, you know, it's all patchy.
It's confusing, right? There's always way too much going on.
So, I mean, that's what I like about that. Like, it's just an octopus. There's a couple pieces of coral and there's some other stuff, but it's just your whole arm is just one big octopus. And then you can put way more detail into like the tentacles or the color blending and that kind of stuff. And then Harmony has the Alphonse Mucha piece, which is like, he's like one of my favorite artists. So it's so cool to be like, when she came and said, hey, I want to do this. And I'm like, oh, Art Nouveau? Like, that's one of my favorite things. Like, yeah, like, we'll do that for sure. Like, let's do it now. Like, when do you want to do it? Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's super cool. I want to do it as soon as possible. Like, before you change your mind on that.
Yeah.
But like,
So people often ask me what style of tattoo you do, and it's kind of a difficult answer because you don't really just do a style. You have, learned so much over the years, and you're able to do quite a bit. How would you define your style, quote unquote?
I don't know. I think when it comes to color, I spent a lot of time doing color theory and being really interested in the stuff that Guy Aitchison did. So I even though my style, a lot of the bright color stuff I do, it might not be texture as much as it used to be like that, but I definitely want to work with color theory. I do a lot with color. Let's put it that way. But that doesn't mean I don't do black and gray. I do a ton of black and gray. But I mean, when I got into this, you had to be able to do everything. So there wasn't like, oh, I can only do this or I can only do that. Like you had to do every kind of style of tattooing. And so, I mean, I don't even know how to describe what my style is. I do a lot of bright, colorful stuff. I do a lot of like black and gray stuff. Like I would really, I think if anything, I want to be able to create something unique for everybody so that they have like their own piece of art that's unique to them. I would like to blend like hyperrealism or like more of that kind of stuff with the watercolor. That's where I'm trying to take a lot of my work in that direction. So it's not just because I do a lot of watercolor, but I don't want people to think that's all I do because I kind of like do a lot of everything. So, I do it all. I guess that's my style is that I want to be able to do everything and do a kind of a good version of it at least, or do like an acceptable version of it all. So.
No, that's awesome. I definitely, it's nice to be able to do everything, right? Like, I feel like if you focus solely on one thing, yeah, you'll get really good at it, but you're going to end up losing a lot of clientele and you won't actually be able to enjoy the art of just tattooing, right? Because you're only able to do one sort of thing.
Well, I think you end up getting like typecast and then like all the thing that you end up loving is the thing that you end up doing every day. And so I've always been afraid of that because then you're kind of like, oh, I want to do this kind of thing, but everybody comes to me to do this kind of thing. And I find it with like, the things that, like that I really like, some of the tattooers, I really enjoy their work of. And I'm like, but like all their sleeves kind of look the same because it's the same kind of thing over and over again. Maybe they change the colors a bit or the textures, but it ends up being the same thing over and over and over again. So I mean, there is something to be said for being able to do one style and do it really well, or one or two styles and do it really, really well. But I don't know. Like when you watch some of those guys on like Ink Master, I think that's the one that stands out to me where it's like this guy that does brilliant like color tattoos, and then they put like a portrait in front of them. Like, okay, today you're doing a portrait, and it was the worst thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, how can you not do a black and gray portrait? Even like just like a passable version, like if you can do like a face in color and make it look good, how come you can't do it in black and gray? Like it's right there. All you have to do is look at the picture. Like you don't have to imagine it. You're not freehanding the portrait on somebody. It should be at least passable. So I'm like, I don't ever want to be in that position, I guess, where I want to be able to like, have anybody that can walk in the shop and say, I want this, and I can be able to do a good version of it. I do a lot of cover-ups. I guess I don't know if that's a style or not, but I mean, I cover a lot of things that I think most people would think you couldn't cover. I mean, that comes back to like really knowing color theory and like how to shade things and color things in a way that you can lose what's underneath the tattoo and so no one can see that it's there. So I end up doing a lot of that stuff, a lot of cover-up stuff, and I enjoy the challenge, that's for sure,
So with cover-ups, this is a question that some people might ask. With the tattoo, the ink goes into the skin, and would the ink end up like mixing with old ink that's already in there? Is that a thing? Does that happen at all?
That's exactly. It all lives in the same layer, for the most part, right? So like when you're painting over your wall, let's say you're changing the color of your wall, right? It's not like that. Like you can't just put the color over top of it and that's it, because everything underneath mixes with it and comes back to the surface. Once it all heals and settles in there, and so you have to know how to take that existing tone of color or tone of ink and blend it out and hide it in the shadows of something else. or work with the existing lines. Like a lot of times I'll do that where I'll trace out those lines and I'll build a new design that works with those lines, but like kind of mask them so you don't really notice it. And that's kind of a good way to do it, because a lot of times you can get away with just putting like, like shading over it in a certain way and using different colors to get rid of it. I do see from time to time people doing white ink over black, and they put a design in, and I think that if you put it in and you pound it in there and you just go over it and over it and over, like let it heal and do it 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 again. Sometimes that white will go over top of it and be solid, but I mean, I think that's a lot of effort,
It's also a little risky too, right? Because once you start putting that stuff in there, it's kind of like if it doesn't work and it doesn't take properly, you're gonna have to try and figure out a way to now fix that as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's not really I don't know. Luckily for me, I think for the most part, I don't ever really put myself in that position. Like, for the most part though, I'm able to cover it another way, and I think that, what people look at my portfolio and they think they don't see a lot of that, like white over black anyways. So luckily they're not coming for that stuff. So
yeah. So we talked a little bit about what style you think you kind of do. What do you find the hardest style for you, like just in art in general? For you,
what? This is the thing that I always find hard in tattooing is like pattern stuff, because I'm really picky about making the patterns all the same, right? So like if it's mandala stuff or like that kind of like repeating patterns, like a circle inside a circle inside a circle is really difficult to do, and do it like competently, right? Like I can do it, but like that's the stuff that I'm gonna nitpick every little thing about, right? Like I want everything to be perfect, right? So I think like those styles are kind of harder, but some people really excel at that. Some people are so much better at it. And I always think, if you're coming to me for that kind of stuff, I'm like, there's guys that'll do a way better job of that stuff. Like, I like to mix it up. So if I can take some of that pattern stuff, but also, mix it with other styles, that kind of, I think works really well. But I think that kind of stuff is pretty tricky, and it's probably not tricky for everybody. But for me, I'm really picky. And that space has to be perfect and everything has to be perfect. And if it's not, I'm gonna look at it, even if it's off a little bit. Like if you hit the outside of one line and then the inside of another line, that spacing starts to get a little wonky. So for myself, that's the stuff I find really difficult, because I want it to be perfect. And yeah, and I think like full color portraits, I find it difficult. I don't do it very often, but I find it difficult because I don't think like any of them ever look right. Like when you see like the best full color portrait tattoo artists out there, it never looks like natural skin tones. And like I'm not sure if that's just because out of the bottle, like the skin tones that you're being given, there's only so many ranges, or if they just don't. But it never, very rarely do you see it actually look like a real photograph. It always looks like a little cartoony, like the flesh tones don't look natural. And so I mean, I try not to even attempt that stuff, because I know that I'm gonna want to make it natural. Like a lot of times when I do like any kind of flesh tones, like I do it the same way I would with an oil painting. So I don't necessarily take the ink out of the bottle. Like I'm gonna mix it in my palette with like dark reds and dark blues, with yellows and whites and browns, and try to get all the different ranges, because you're gonna have like some areas that are bluer and some areas that are redder, so you kind of have to know, you kind of have to mix it yourself out of the bottle. So I always think like that's the stuff that I that stuff I never seen anyone, I rarely see someone do a good job of it. So I'm like, why would I want to do that if I can't do it the best that it can be done? I kind of don't want to do it.
No, that makes sense. I completely understand that. So something I want to talk a little bit about is hands, neck, and face tattoos. Mm-hmm. So myself, I just got a hand tattoo about almost a year ago now, actually. think like 9 months ago, and it's the cover for my newest DVD release, Space Goats. And for me, that was a big one because I really wanted to have something that I could, I have to look at every single time that I'm like using my hands to kind of remind myself that I worked my ass off on this and that I should, strive for the best and work harder and try and do something else.
Yeah.
And I've found that hand and neck tattoos have become very accepted in society lately. Like, you can kind of see it more places that you go. However, with face tattoos, they are starting to become a little bit bigger, but they're not accepted. And why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I was always taught when I got into this that it's like the old school way. Like, you didn't get a hand tattoo unless you already had a full sleeve, like that kind of thing. And even like necks, I call it the Warp Tour, like the Warp Tour bodysuit, like where you see a guy that has like his hands are all tattooed and his neck is all tattooed, but then when he takes off his hoodie, he doesn't have anything on his arms. Like, you see that a lot where you're like, oh, you went straight to the neck before you got anything on your arms. Like, that seems kind of like, unless you're, what are you saving your arms for, I guess. But
yeah,
I don't know. I used to be really against face tattoos, and I still kind of am, but I can see like why people get some of the ones they get. Like, sometimes you can make it look beautiful. Like some people, like my friend Katie it's funny because we were talking about this at New Moon, and she's a piercer at New Moon, and I was like, we were talking about face tattoos, and I'm like, oh, face tattoos, like, what are you, a rapper? And then she's like, I got a face tattoo. I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? And she does. She has like mandalas on the side of her face. And you're like, you do have face tattoo. I didn't even realize it. Like if it's sometimes it can accent and look really good on some people. You can't imagine them without that tattoo on their face, But I feel like if someone, it goes back to that same, like, but she's heavily tattooed, and it goes back to that same thing that I think I learned when I was starting. Like if you have two tattoos on, like, one on your ankle and one on your shoulder blade, maybe don't get your face tattooed, because that's like, people are going to judge you. And you know what, as much as it's not right that people judge you, if you have a big thing on the side of your face, like, you're
setting
you're limiting
up, right?
you're limiting yourself a lot, and I'll try to tell people, at least, luckily for me, people don't come to me for face tattoos. And I mean, maybe that's just a good thing, I don't know. But like, people aren't knocking out my door wanting a face tattoo anyways, so I guess that's probably to my benefit. But like, you definitely, it does limit you, I think, unless you're a tattoo artist. Like, and there's certain places that, yeah, you can get your face tattooed, but like, what I mean? Like, I don't know if, you're going to be like, working at a bank, or, like, where, like, what's your future going to be like at that point? It kind of limits where you can go, I think, a lot of times. And it just makes you look like when you guys were little, I had a lip ring and I had a lot of tattoos. Like, this whole arm's been lasered off, and we're re-tattooing this arm. But I mean, at the time, it was a solid big black sleeve, and like, I remember going to the playground with you guys and having this lip ring and thinking, like, people were looking at me like I'm a freak job, and that I don't have any income, like I'm unemployed, I'm some kind of freak job. And I also thought, like, people were kind of like, I didn't want that to be one of those things where my kids, can't play with your kids because of like the the lip, the piercings and all the tattoos. And I know that things have changed a lot since then, but like, there's a lot of time, like, there are times when you want to, I like the idea of being able to show the tattoos when you want to and not when you don't want to, right? So there's certain, even though I got my hands tattooed and that kind of thing, I still feel like it's something you gotta consider, I think. Like, you shouldn't consider it flippantly. Like, I've had kids come in with their parents, at 16 years old, and want their hands tattooed, and I'm like, we're not doing that. You have like one tattoo on your arm, you're not getting your hand tattooed. Like, not here. I mean, there's lots of places that'll do it, but like, here's why I won't do it, and maybe consider that, because the other guys might not give a shit, and they'll just tattoo you, and then here you are, at 16, you're like, look at my hand tattoo, and then at like 26, you're like, what do you mean I can't work here because of this stupid tattoo on my hand? Like, it's gonna limit you. And so, I mean, and that's not really, it's not right and it's not fair, but like, it's gonna happen.
No,
So,
I
and
completely agree with that. To be honest, I think even like myself getting my hand done, I was very, very unsure about doing it at the time, and I did it, and I'm actually very happy that I did. I think it just kind of meets my personality, and also on top of that, I do have a father that's a tattoo artist, right?
mhm.
So it kind of makes sense. Like, I definitely think in the future I would like to get my neck, but I also agree with you that like you really should consider it, and you should be able to hide them whenever you feel like it, right? And at least with your hands, it's not the first thing that people see. With your face, that is the first thing that people see. And if that's the vibe you want to give off, then of course go ahead and do it. But
I think it depends too on the design. Like if something looks nice, then I think people are a little bit more accepting when something looks good. You know, like if it looks good on your face, if it's a beautiful tattoo that's well done and it fits nicely and it makes sense, then people I think are a little more accepting. Like if it's, but I think most of the times you see the opposite, where you see something where you're like, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. Like I saw a guy when we were shopping one time for at Toys R Us for Christmas presents, and he had like an eagle across his forehead, you know, with the wings spread, and then he had like a wolf on his cheek, and I'm just like, it doesn't look good. It's like they weren't well done. They don't fit the body very well. And I'm like, they're also Cherry Creek Flash. I'm like, you have literally like a fucking tattoo on you that everybody has on their shoulder, you know, like on your face. Like it's not even unique looking. Or sometimes you see them where it looks like, I don't know, it didn't look good. You know, I think there's ways you can make it look good, but it's also like people are gonna look, you know, and people are gonna judge you, and so you gotta really consider. I think it's a big responsibility. You know, it's a big responsibility if you're gonna do that for people. And I don't know. I feel like I'm a little more like I don't need someone's money that bad. You know, I guess that's what it comes down to is like everything you do when it comes to that kind of stuff is like it still lives on beyond you. And so like the money is long spent, and then, you know, 10 years later that person still has that tattoo, you know, and it, you know, is it going to make their life better or worse? You know, a lot of times probably not better, you know, and that's, I don't know if I want to be responsible for that. I'm like, someone else can do it by all means, but I don't want to have that on my shoulders, you know? Like, I don't think it's good karma to have a bunch of people, you know, like, you know, they're having a bad life because you needed, you know, a couple $100 that day, and you didn't want to, you know, or maybe you didn't have the courage to tell them that's a bad idea, or you thought, oh, that looked fucking cool, and then like, you know, a year later they still have it, you know, and you're like, whoa, I can't believe that guy got that stupid thing on his face. Like, at the same time, you can't babysit people either, right? If someone's an adult and they want something stupid on their face, you can be like, that's stupid, and maybe they'll go get someone else to do it, you know, and you know, maybe it works out. Maybe they do get something on their face and it's stupid and they never regret it. I mean, that seems like a best case scenario. Like, you know, maybe all the great things happen because of that, but I highly doubt that's going to happen, you know, and I think, so I do think it's a big responsibility, you know, the tattoo artist, you have a responsibility to, like, you know, at least discuss those things with people because you are doing something permanent on them. And I think that seems to be lost, I think, these days. I think with a lot of the like the newer people getting into this, that it just seems like, oh, let's just do something cool, and you know, I want all this stuff, and I want to get, you know, right up to my chin, I want tattooed, and you're like, maybe you should, like, especially when you're young, it's like, yeah, it looks good on a person who's, you know, in their 20s because, you know, like they're not old and wrinkly. The tattoo hasn't sat in their face for 20 years. You know, when it's on your face in the sun for 30 years, it's gonna look shitty, you know, like, and so you still have that, you know, and then you're a middle-aged person. You're like I have a friend who had gotten laser done to remove a tribal tattoo she had across her chest. And she got it in her 20s. And yeah, in your 20s, that looks really cool. Especially in the 90s, that was like kind of like a really cool thing to have. But then, you know, when she was in her 30s, you know, she's like, I work in an office and I got, you know, I'm trying to wear a nice professional business suit and I have this tribal tattoo across my chest, like those big things, you know, going down my cleavage. So, you know, like, and that's just on your chest. That's not your face. That's not your hands. So I kind of always think like you got to be really, really, I don't know, I'm apprehensive about what you're doing on people, you know, especially like if it's going to look, it should look it should enhance the body and at least look beautiful and look good, so
No, I can agree with that.
it kind of makes me, I feel like, maybe I'm a little, as far as tattoo artists go, maybe a little more, I'm not as like, I should just be, thumbs up, get your whole face tattooed if you want to, but I kind of feel like that's not for me. I think if other people want to do it, then by all means, there's lots of tattooers that'll do that for you. But like, I don't want to do it unless it's something so cool that it's going to enhance it and it's going to look great. Then I guess, but that's pretty rare, I find, but
I've definitely seen some that are on like the side where like your sideburns would be that look really cool, but you definitely still gotta wonder, right? You gotta be careful with it.
Well, I saw a girl when we were in Toronto just randomly. She had like a dagger and a heart like right here. And it's just like she didn't have a lot of other tattoos either. So I'm like, you went to your face for your like second tattoo and it's like a big bright tattoo on your face. Like, it's like, it didn't look good. It was off-putting, I was like, ugh. Like, I don't even want to talk to this person. Like, and maybe that's the whole point, is that it's supposed to be like a suit of armor, so maybe people don't talk to you, I guess. But like, I don't know. It didn't look good. And I'm like, I don't think it helps the tattoo industry. Like, I think that people see that and they think like, maybe, if you're outside of the industry, like when you see that, you might also be kind of put off by it. Like, and I feel like as ambassadors of tattooing, you kind of should always show it in the best light you can.
Yeah, no, that's
that's
completely
like,
true.
And who am I to say, right? That's my personal opinion, and like, maybe, and I feel like I'm a little more of like I take tattooing way more seriously than a lot of tattooers do. And I think I'm a little more nerdy about that stuff. Like, I don't really, it doesn't appeal to me, so.
One of my favorite tattoos that you've ever done was your buddy Tristan. It's the back of his head, and that looked so fucking good. And it's kind of nice though, because he can just wear a hat or just grow his hair out, and he doesn't have it anymore essentially. So I think that's a big difference, right? And it is something that like you can see pretty frequently, but yeah, you can just.
He also got in trouble huge at work for having that.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, you can't walk around here with that tattoo on the back of your head like that. So, I mean, like, it's good to have it. And I mean, it's kind of one of those things that, like, unfortunately, we all have to work. You know what I mean? Like, it's stupid that we all do. And I tell people every day, I'm like, like you're selling your time, and your time is something you can't get back. So, like, if you're going to work for a living, you got to make sure that you get compensated for selling your time to people. But like, like at a certain point where you're like, like someone's telling you can't wear a hat, to work here, you can't do this to work here. I always think like, well, fuck them. Like, you can find another job, right? But I think at the same time, like, yeah, I don't know. We all unfortunately have to adhere to certain rules, I guess. But.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so now that we're done that, let's talk a little bit about your obsession with the octopus. A lot of your paintings include it. You've done a lot of really, really cool pieces. I believe her name is Vicky, who has the huge octopus on her back that looks amazing. Myself, I have my arm done, and that was a lot because I wanted to kind of have a representation of yourself, and this is based on like a painting that you've done and other stuff as well. So.
Yeah, that's based on the painting, and I mean, I think it came up so nice. I don't really know I don't know how that obsession began. Like, I liked drawing tentacles. I think there's something cool about them, especially with like the repetition. And this is again like the nerdy art part of me, like how you can take those little suckers and make them change as it twists around something. I like that. And but the octopus itself was kind of like a part of it is, I think if you were to think of like what an alien would look like, it would probably be like an octopus. Like, they're super smart, and like, if they wanted to, they can change they can like disguise themselves, as like plants in the ocean. They can do all these things, so there's something cool about that, as well. But like, I don't know, there's something about it that they're, they take out sharks, You know, like there's videos of octopus like ambushing and taking out sharks. Like there's something about like those like the 8 arms or whatever. And but then it also became something that was like a kind of more of like on a deeper level. I always thought of it as like being like the 8 arms to rule them all, right? Like it's like the behind the scenes, the powers that control everything around you, right? Like reaching out to all the corners and pulling all the levers. If that doesn't make any sense, but like, you know, that's why you see it in a lot of the paintings, because it kind of represents that like the invisible hand, you know, that seems to be controlling everything behind the scenes. So
No, that's a really good explanation.
the esoteric, that's what it is. Esoteric, like stuff where it is like the, you know, the things that, and I think you'll see it a lot in the paintings, because a lot of it has to do with like the impending doom, you know, or the like something that's unnatural, because usually I'll stick it in like an unnatural setting so it doesn't seem to make sense. So it's kind of like this weird, like, you know, like unstoppable force like taking over. And so I don't know. And I mean, you can read a lot of meaning into it, you know, that's for sure. But like, it's definitely, that's kind of part of it, you know?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's really true. If you had to pick 3 tattoos out of the thousands that you've done, what would be your favorite or your best work? If you can kind of describe them a little bit. That's a tough one, I know.
Yeah, that's the thing where it's like every day. It's usually the last tattoo I did is my favorite. You know, let's put it that way. Like every day, every week, I do something that I'm just stoked on. So I'm like, oh, it's so great. And I'll go through my books and I'll be like, oh, this is my favorite tattoo. And then you see another one like, oh no, wait, this is my favorite tattoo. So I don't really have a lot of the favorite ones. I think the ones that mean a lot to me, I don't know. Too many. There's too many. Like it's like picking your favorite. I don't know. There is too many. I like them. I like them all. There's very few of them that I don't like. Let's put it that way. So I feel like they're all kind of like, you know, they all come from the same place, you know, and they evolve. So, you know, like one tattoo that you did 10 years ago, you know, it's like I look at that and I'm like, I don't even do that style anymore. Like I don't even draw like waves that way anymore. I don't do that anymore. But I still, you can see like that was the basis for what you're doing today. But yeah, I don't know. I think that the ones that matter the most to me are the ones that, you know, mean the most to the people that have them. You know, because they're not really, it's not about me. You know, I like them all. You know, the ones that are the most, you know, as perfect as I can make them, I guess those are the ones that flow the nicest. But I mean, my books are full of the ones that I really like, you know, so
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah.
All right. Well, who are some of the artists that you looked up to when you were starting, and how has that changed?
The artists would always be, again, there's different ways to break it down. So like the tattoo artist that I really liked when I was learning to tattoo was Guy Aitchison, and from Chicago. At the time he's Chicago, now he's somewhere in Illinois. He revolutionized tattooing. Like he literally wrote the book on tattooing called Reinventing the Tattoo. And he was like, back in those days, like people were pushing the limits of what you could do. So he was working with color and texture and really making things as 3-dimensional as you can make them. So I really like Guy. I've always liked Guy Aitchison. I've wanted to get tattooed by him. I don't know if that'll happen or not. It's funny because a part of me thinks you probably shouldn't meet those people that you look up to so much. And Aaron Kane, obviously, they were all that's kind of the same bag. Like they were both doing biomechanical. I loved biomechanical back then. I still do. I never get to do it, but I love it, you know? And I'm like, I think that if I started like posting some of the drawings that I do, I probably would get to do it. But, definitely Guy Aitchison and Aaron Kane. I mean, back then there was also Marcus Pacheco, and that was one of those ones that like they were pushing the limits of what you could do as a tattoo, especially like making things that were more artsy. So it was more like Cubist, like the early versions of Cubist tattooing and things like that, and like pushing like what you could do with color. And I think that those were the guys that really inspired me, because back in those days, everybody's tattooing looked different. Like it seems kind of like I sound like a salty old man when I say that stuff, but like nowadays it's not like that. Nowadays, it's like somebody pulled something off Google and they tattooed it really well on somebody, but it lacks like character and personality. Like it's not like something that someone drew that actually seems to really speak about their like who they are, I guess, as an artist. But back in those days, there was guys like that were pushing it, like Marcus Pacheco, Aaron Kane, Guy Aitchison, the Grime. But the Grime kind of came slightly later. Like the Grime Monster came after that. Adrian Lee also kind of came from that same like area. And those are people I looked up to and that were in magazines and stuff. But there's also the guys like the Canadian tattoo artists. Like, I mean, I looked up to Jamie Azumi a long time before I met him. And like, because some of the tattoos I seen that he had done were like the most perfect tattoo I've ever seen. And I was like, I've never seen someone do such perfect circles before, or clean, perfect outlines. So I always looked up to guys like that, and of course, like Vivian Lagonzia, which is like, that's kind of an oddball one, but she was from Seattle and she did like really abstract kind of arty tattoos. And like, I don't think a lot of people really even know of who she is now, but like her stuff was always kind of like it was unique, no one tattooed like that. And obviously, like, looked up to Al. Like, that was the first time I saw good tattoos. Was the guy that taught me tattooing. It's Al Zimmerman is his name. Tattoos by Zap on Sound. And I would see his stuff on the street, just on random people, and be like, "Wow, that's the best tattoo I've ever seen." And I mean, that was back early '90s, but that was still like the best thing I've ever seen. So I looked up to him when I first got into tattooing, and kind of like, once I met him and started working for him and learning from him, it's like you start to, I looked up to him in a different way after that, like, as a mentor, like, it's kind of, he was the guy, like, I don't know how to describe it, but he really knew how to teach a person how to be a tattoo artist. So I really looked up to him for that, back in those days. And like obviously like Dave Nick, I said earlier, Dave Nicholson was, he used to work at Tattoo Spice Half. He learned there back in the day, and like his drawings were the first ones that I really like saw like hands on, like some of the best drawings that I'd ever seen. I'm like, I want to draw like that. I want to be that creative, but also like their drawings were perfectly balanced and that kind of stuff. But he got his style from, he looked up, I think, to a lot of like Mike Austin and a lot of Philip Liu. So there's too many to be just like, oh, here's the top 3 guys. Like there's so many of them out there. And like I mentioned earlier, like Dan Alliston, like Dan was a guy that was doing a lot of like crazy stuff back then, and he like knew everybody in tattooing as well, because he still does. So it's kind of interesting when I talk to him. Like I realized a couple of years ago, like, and we're talking about Aaron Kane, how much I love him, and then my friend Milena's like works for Dan, and she's like, oh, you should have Dan show you his Aaron Kane tattoo. I'm like, oh, you got tattooed by that guy? And he's like, oh yeah, back when he was just a kid, and it's just kind of interesting. Like on him, he has, little, tattoos from everybody that I look up to. I'm like, well, this guy's, he's, and people that, I'm like, this guy's been tattooed by everybody that I look up to. It's pretty cool to see. Like that's kind of cool. I mean, obviously nowadays, like some of my favorite tattooers are like, again, it's the guy like my buddy Brian from Torah. Like, when I first met him, I've really come to realize that he has like the perfect balance with his tattooing. Like it's open enough to last, but it's got enough detail that it doesn't look like a too simple. Like he's got a perfect balance between all that stuff. And I mean, he's just such a great tattooer, and I think that's such a, working with him every day, and that even working at Torah, that was the big thing. Like I put myself in that position because I was, in sound, I was a big fish in a small pond, right? There was nobody else tattooing around, and nobody tattooing good. The only other good tattooer even close to us was Kincardin, and that would be like Scott Duncan at Sugar Shack. And I mean, I'd see his work and I'd be like, wow, that's like, the best tattooing I've ever seen. But like, nobody was doing good tattooing for the most part, so I was a big fish in a small pond, and so I wanted to put myself, next, work alongside the best guys in the world, and Jamie was one of the best in the world at the time, right? Like his, he was winning awards everywhere he went, And like I'm like I want to work next to that guy. I want to see how, and you get influenced by it, obviously, right? So you see like how he works, and I've taken a lot of what I learned from Torah and brought it into my business, like the professionalism and like the work ethic and that kind of stuff. But you work alongside that every day, and you start to see like, oh, there's some really, like they're so good, and I've made so many good friends from it too, which is like, like some of my best friends are tattoo artists, right? Then, it's almost like you take it for granted that, all these people that you've met over the years are such good tattooers, and like, it's kind of like become the standard, but yeah, it's so I guess like that's probably, there's so many people that I would consider my favorite tattooers right now, and people that you'd want to look for. There's a guy in Texas, his name's Ty McEwen, and he does some of the nicest like biomechanical stuff now. Like he's working with texture and color in a way that I really like. And like I think like guys like that. There's another guy whose name I can't think of off the top of my head, and I feel like an idiot because like it's like an Instagram thing. His name's Christian. I want to say Ringstrom, but he does like a lot of stuff where he works with like hyper realism and geometry together and kind of like blends that really well. And I mean, I love that style, and I try to use it, like, you can see the fingerprints of that in some of the work that I'm doing now, but like he does it on a way different level. Like it's out there, but it's so good. And I'm like, I like anything that's creative, and unique looking. So I mean, there are tattooers out there that are doing unique creative work right now, but I feel like, a lot of the stuff you see online too, you're like, oh, I've seen that same dove tattooed 7 different times because it's the first thing that comes up on Google, and so everyone takes it and uses it in their pieces. So I mean, I kind of like, it's kind of easy to get salty about it, but
No, that's completely fair. So we talked about some of your favorites when you first started.
Mhm.
Let's give a shout out to 3 artists that are up and coming that people should check out.
Yeah, definitely Ty McEwen. I think he does great stuff. That's one of the guys I really like. 3 of them is tough, right? There's like up and coming. I don't know about up and coming. Like my friend Milena from New Moon does some of the nicest stuff, and like I've watched her, go from being a piercer like 15 years ago or so to being a tattoo artist now, and her work, every time I see it, it's like always progressing and always getting better and always blowing my mind. And so I look at that stuff, I'm just like, wow, like, but I see that with a lot of my friends that are tattoo artists, where like their work keeps progressing and getting better and better and better. Like obviously my buddy Robert, does great work, like from Thrive. Robert Vietzchik does like the best. He does some really nice tattooing, obviously. But up and comer, I mean, he's been doing it for a while, so it's not really up and coming anymore. But like, I'm getting tattooed actually next week by Glenn Paradis from Barnstormer Tattoo in Ottawa. And again, he's not really up and coming. He's been doing this probably for 15 or 20 years, but he does like the best tattoos. Like he has a good handle on color theory, but just like a lot of like anatomy drawing type tattoos, like skewed perspective anatomy, but like he does it, it's so good. What he does is so perfect. And another guy, I'm wearing his shirt right now, actually. This is Steve Moore. Hold on. There we go. Steve Moore from Get Moore Tattoos in Nanaimo, Vancouver Island. He's been tattooing for a long time as well, but his work is incredible. Like that's like, if I could do anything with my work, that's the direction I want to take it in. And he does a lot of like, it's color theory, like his color theory is off the wall, but it's like illustrative. There's a lot of illustrative and like, a lot of like skewed perspective and anatomy drawings and stuff like that. Like just perfect. That's maybe some people to look out for if you're looking for tattoos. I mean, there's good tattooers everywhere you turn. Like I'm always surprised that like I'll see a piece and I'll be like, who did that tattoo? And there'll be like somebody in Toronto, and they'll say some name of a shop I've never heard of, that is a person I've never heard of before, but the work is incredible. And you're like, who is this person? Like, where did this guy come from? Like, I feel like that happens a lot, guy or girl. I say guy, but I mean, a lot of my favorite tattooers I find lately are women, you know, and it's like that's pretty cool. Like like I said, my friend Milena is like one of the she's just like unstoppable lately. Like she does the best Japanese tattooing and the best when it comes to like lettering and stuff like that. But like she's unstoppable and she just keeps progressing all the time. And on top of that, she's just like a rad person to hang out with. You're like, oh, you're like, you know, like you're the trifecta of awesome people, you know. So I mean, there's so many good tattooers. So I mean, like obviously there's you know, like you can't. That's the thing about Instagram is like you can scroll through Instagram and like see like 30 awesome tattoos. And I mean, that's my news feed is all tattoos. It's like the things I love. It's all like tattoos, skateboarding, bulldogs, and snowboarding. So
Gotta
it's
have the
like
Bulldogs in
that's
there.
all it is. Like that's like I only like 4 things, and that's all it's in my news feed. And so like you see nothing but great tattoos. And so I to the point where you get like almost cynical about it. You're like, oh, another great tattoo, another great tattoo, another great tattoo. And the same with the skateboarding. You're like, oh, another perfect 360 flip down some giant set of stairs, you know. But like, you know, but I also I'm pretty salty about it because I mean, especially when it comes to skateboarding, like I feel like there's something that's lost. Like it used to be, you know, like when you see people like when all their parts are coming from the skate park, like all the footage of skate park footage, or like do you ever ride in the streets? Do you ever, like, especially when they're pros, you're like you should be riding in the streets. Like, you know, skate parks don't count. You know, like do that in the streets. You know, and it sounds kind of like maybe like a jaded perspective, but like get in the streets because that's where all of
The real shit happens.
yeah,
That's for sure.
real shit happens in the streets. You know, so and also it just feels like that's kind of like the skateboarding that I grew up with and stuff that I love was like there were no skate parks back then, so you had to go to the streets and you had to jump downstairs, you had to get dodge security, you had to like always constantly be in that kind of position, you know. Where now it's you know it's kind of funny because now I skate in the park, like 90% of the skating I do is in the park anyways, but a lot of times I still feel like it's you know, like I like skating the streets better, you know, and there's just something about pushing and just like rolling down the street, like it just, you know, something that, you know, you can't get that in the park, you know.
No,
In
exactly.
the park, you're dodging everybody. You're dodging 1,000 little kids and people that don't know what they're, you know, that they're
yeah.
doing. Like when you're skating the streets as a kid with your friends, like no one was hanging out that didn't belong. There was no posers. There was no like just like hang-arounds that didn't know what they were doing. You know, they were, you know, we were welcoming of everybody, but at the same time, it's like skateboarding wasn't big enough that you had like 30 kids hanging around anyway. So like if you had a skateboard, you had to be into it. And if your board didn't have a mark on it, it looked like it was brand new. It's like you better have just set that up today, because if you've had that for longer than a couple of days and it doesn't have a scratch on it, you need to go home. You know.
That's so true. Yeah, well, I think we're just about at the end of this. So, is there anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered everything. I think I rambled for a long time about a lot of things.
That's A-okay.
And I think I covered everything. I mean, there's so much more I could talk about. I mean, I got 1,000 stories.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I'm still getting comfortable with even, you know, just talking about all this stuff, like, you know, on camera and doing all this stuff. So like, you know, I'm sure that, you know, once I can kind of get really comfortable with this stuff and kind of let the stories come out. There's so many great stories anyhow, but
Yeah,
no,
for
I had a
sure.
good time and I think it's awesome. So
Yeah, before we go, one more thing. Milena, I believe, did this amazing, I think it was a tiger on this dude's chest. It's absolutely huge. I believe that was her, was it not? Yeah, that looked
on
incredible
Adrian,
too.
yeah, that whole front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looked incredible. And it goes back to what you were saying about having a piece focused on one main thing and not throwing too many elements in, right? Like that piece looks amazing.
Yeah, and you can read it from a distance, you know. And she's also got like a lot of old school training, you know, like Dan taught her, you know, they make needles together. They do all that stuff. So she's well grounded in tattooing.
Yeah.
And so I think it shows, you know.
No, that's so true. Alrighty. Well, that's all for today.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for coming out. And thank you guys for all listening. Be sure to check out some of the other podcasts I've done, and hopefully we'll have another one next week. This is Sin City Rude Kids by Be Like Max, and after that we got some Kill Lincoln. Peace.
some respect to the system of death. Reaching up the fortunate few. It's gonna get tough now if the youth don't have a way to try and lose some of the steam. It's building up fast from the harsh realities. Well, I can confess I'm a mess on my own now. Always rely on the fans in my own town. Bringing back a little respect. Without the kids who really give a damn, without you left, well, some will be deprived when they watch their only idols from outside. 'Cause now we feel like we belong. 'Cause when the sound fights back and some's gotta give, pay some respect to the censor of death. Sitting up the clubs will bend. They need a paycheck when the system wasn't meant for crowds young enough not to drink, but old enough to love the songs that we sing. Well, I understand that we all gotta eat, but what you don't get is the music's kinda late when no one's there to sing in the front. Only old folks at the bar with their arms crossed. I would like to thank every boy and girl who made these moments great. 'Cause now we feel like we belong. 'Cause when the sound fights back and some's gotta give, pay some respect to the censor of death. Well, now I know I'm growing old, but I can't forget all I owe to all the days of my past. You see, it wasn't just a fad to me. Those moments made me who I am. No wonder why I take a stand for all the kids that just like me feel their pain go away when the music hits. Pay some respect to the censor of death.
What is it you want us to do?